So there are moments in politics that change everything, not because of what they promise, but because of what they actually reveal. And this was one of those mask off moments for the modern Labour Party. But let me just play the video quickly for you first so you can see what I'm talking about. The sound and the video are slightly out of sync, which I know is a bit annoying, but you can hear what she says fine.
Of asylum hotels by the Conservatives that increased enormously at enormous cost.
Yeah, you keep going back to the Conservatives.
And
I want to ask
yes,
you...
but it won't be a quick fix. We will sort it.
Your lawyers, under your guidance, have said in terms that the rights of asylum seekers are more important than the rights of local people in Epping Forest. Would you at least acknowledge that that is what they will hear? And it's up to you. Ministers can say, we agree with that, or we don't agree with it. You can't simply say, let's balance things. Do you agree with what your lawyers said, or don't you?
Yes, of course we do.
On national television, a senior Labour minister was basically cornered into admitting that her government prioritises the rights of foreign asylum seekers over the safety of British people. I know this doesn't come as a surprise, but to my knowledge, that is the first time they have ever publicly admitted it. The Home Office lawyers have effectively backed the Labour government into a corner. And this is all the inevitable conclusion of a 25-year project to re-engineer Britain, a project that was conceived in secret, executed with contempt, and much to our delight is now finally collapsing under its own arrogance. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, the idea that there's been this 25-year project to re-engineer Britain, but sit with me, I will prove that to you, and I do have evidence to support the claim. Before I come on to that 25-year project, I do just want to touch on that interview you just watched. So, as I'm sure you're aware, it was about the Bell Hotel in Epping. We've got 138 asylum seekers there being housed. An Ethiopian man residing in that hotel had been charged with the assault of a 14-year-old girl. The local council fought in court to have those men removed, one only to be overruled by the Labour government lawyers who appealed the decision. And when the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, was asked repeatedly if her government's position was that the rights of those asylum seekers outweighed the concerns of that community, she tried to deflect. She blamed the Tories, and admittedly there's an awful lot to blame the Tories for. But she was also talking about a balance of rights. But Trevor Phillips, the journalist, and credit to him, he didn't let her get out of this one. And I think it may have been cut for brevity, but I think that was about the fifth time he asked. And when the truth finally came out as to whether or not the rights of those asylum seekers outweighed the concerns of the community, because that was what the lawyers argued. And the direct question is, do Labour support that? And the unequivocal answer is yes, of course we do. So the official excuse will be that it's simply about legal obligations. Phillipson claimed the government had to uphold Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights to avoid chaos and prevent asylum seekers becoming destitute. This is just doublespeak of an elite that has forgotten who it serves. Balance of rights? Well, what about the 14-year-old's right to feel safe in her own town? That's not an abstract legal principle to be balanced against the accommodation preferences of foreign men who've entered our country illegally. Their supposed legal obligations are to a foreign court in Strasbourg, not to the British people. Most notably the people who pay their salaries and trust them with their safety. But this wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a slip of the tongue. This is genuinely what the Labour Party believe. And they're not even trying to hide it anymore, ultimately because they can't. Home Office lawyers have effectively forced them into this position, which is great from our perspective. But this admission didn't come from nowhere. This is the result of a very, it's a consistent, deliberate ideology that they have hidden for years. So Labour's current talk on immigration is basically just a cynical fraud designed to fool you, which obviously fails miserably. But, I mean, it's contradicted by their voting record, their legal arguments, and their actions. So on the one hand, we've got Keir Starmer using slogans that he seemed to have stole straight from Brexit, promising to take back control and that illegal entrants will be detained and sent back. I mean, one of their very first acts in government was to introduce a bill to formally repeal the Rwanda legislation. It's the classic, say one thing to get your vote and do the exact opposite when they get into power. So Labour's defence is that they opposed the Conservative laws because they were unworkable and inhumane, not because they oppose border control in principle. They claim that their plan for new Border Security Command is a much more effective solution. Well, their solution seems to be just hiring more caseworkers to process more asylum claims. That's not border control, it's just managing the surrender more efficiently. They didn't just oppose the method of deterrence, they opposed the principle of it, and the proof is in their own legal filings in the Epping Forest case. I mean, the government lawyers argued in court that the public interests were not equal and that the national duty to asylum seekers under international law took precedence over the British community. They clearly believe in a two-tier system of rights, and your rights are on the bottom rung. But where did then this whole rotten ideology come from? And this is going back to the point I made earlier, that this has been a long-running plan for 25 odd years, and it's no mistake that this is now happening. So the immigration crisis that we're currently facing, it's the direct, intentional result of a covert new Labour project under Tony Blair to use mass migration as a political weapon to permanently alter British society. For years, a lot of people suspected this, but we've actually had confessions from the architects themselves in the past. So Andrew, is it Nether? I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. He was a former Blair government advisor, and in 2009, he admitted that the driving political purpose of mass immigration was to make the UK truly multicultural, and in his words, to rub the right's nose in diversity and render their arguments out of date. It wasn't a passive response to economic trends. Peter Mandelson, a key architect of New Labour, confessed in 2013 that they actively sent out search parties for immigrants, encouraging them to come to Britain. Just let that sink in for a moment. Actively sent out search parties for immigrants. And the numbers prove it. I mean, under Blair, net migration quadrupled, adding about 2.2 million to the population. It was essentially a demographic revolution conducted by stealth. The official line from that era was immigration was necessary to fill skills shortages in a booming economy. The same tired rhetoric we hear today. But of course, the insiders themselves admitted the economy was just a cover story. Neither's confession is the smoking gun. They used economic arguments to justify a radical social engineering project they knew the British people would never have approved to if they had been consulted. It was a profound, covert act of cultural and political subversion. The crime, the social division, the strain on our services, none of it is an accident. It is the intended outcome of a plan set in motion about 25 years ago. And now, the party that started it all is facing its final spectacular reckoning. But this is, I think, bigger than just that one minister's gaffe on the news or an unpopular party. I mean, this is a 2.5 decade betrayal. And that line runs directly from Andrew Neither's secret memo, through the Blair-era floodgates, through Labour's consistent votes against border controls, and it culminates in Bridget Phillipson's accidental confession on a Sunday morning sofa. It reveals a political class that sees the British people not as citizens to be served, but as an inconvenient obstacle to be managed, re-educated, or simply replaced. But this is the great irony, and it's that in their arrogant attempt to rub the right's nose in diversity and make patriotic arguments obsolete, they've made those arguments more powerful and more necessary than ever. I mean, they've essentially created the very revolt that they spent a generation trying to prevent. We're essentially watching the death rattle of the Blairite paradigm play out before our eyes. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you've watched until the end here, thank you. I do appreciate it. But if you could subscribe, like, or even share the video, that would be much appreciated. But until next time, thank you for watching.